The pool water rippled under the fading August sun, and I was alone, floating, trying to drown out the noise in my head. My name's Ethan, 18, and I'd been coming to Jake's house all summer. But tonight felt different charged, like the air before a storm. Then I heard the patio door slam, and my heart stopped. Jake's dad, Mr. Callahan, stood there, his silhouette towering against the house's glowing windows. His eyes locked onto me, sharp and unreadable, like he'd caught me stealing something precious. I sank lower into the water, my pulse hammering, because I knew what he'd seen earlier that day, Jake and me. Too close, too quiet, in the garage. We weren't just friends. Not anymore. Jake, with his easy grin and fearless way of moving through the world, had been my anchor since we were kids in this sleepy Virginia suburb. But this summer, something shifted. Stolen glances turned into stolen touches, and every moment with him felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, thrilling, terrifying, and impossible to turn back from. I'd never told anyone I was gay, not even my parents, and Jake was still figuring himself out. But in that garage, when his hand brushed mine and lingered, I knew we were both falling. Mr. Callahan's voice cut through the evening air. Ethan, get out of the pool. Now. His tone wasn't angry, but it carried a weight that made my stomach twist. I climbed out, dripping, my t-shirt clinging to my skin, and stood there like a kid caught sneaking out. He didn't move, just watched me, his jaw tight. You think I don't see what's going on? He said, stepping closer. You and Jake. I saw you today. My mouth went dry. I wanted to run, to dive back into the pool and disappear, but my feet were glued to the concrete. It's not what you think, I stammered, but the lie tasted bitter. He raised an eyebrow, and I knew he wasn't buying it. Stay away from my son, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. You're not dragging him into this. The words hit like a punch. Dragging him. Like I was some kind of poison. I thought of Jake's laugh, the way his eyes lit up when we talked about escaping this town, and I wanted to scream that I'd never heard him. But Mr. Callahan's stare pinned me in place, and all I could do was nod. He turned and walked back inside, leaving me shivering despite the humid air. I grabbed my towel and bolted for the gate, my mind racing. Jake was inside, probably oblivious, maybe scrolling on his phone in his room. I wanted to text him, to tell him everything, but my hands were shaking too hard. What if his dad was right? What if I was pulling Jake into something he wasn't ready for? By the time I got home, my phone buzzed. Jake, where'd you go? You okay? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to tell him about his dad, about the way my chest ached, but I didn't. Instead, I typed, yeah, just tired. Talk tomorrow. But tomorrow wasn't safe. Nothing felt safe anymore. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Mr. Callahan's words. I thought of Jake's hand in mine, the way he'd whispered, "This feels right," in the garage. And I wondered if we'd ever get the chance to figure out what this was. The next morning, I biked to the community center where Jake worked as a lifeguard. The pool was packed with kids screaming and splashing, but Jake sat on the high chair, his sunglasses hiding his eyes. I waved, and he climbed down, his smile faltering when he saw my face. What's wrong? He asked, pulling me aside. I hesitated. How do you tell someone their dad wants you gone? Your dad. He saw us yesterday, I said finally. In the garage. He told me to stay away from you. Jake's face went pale. What? Why didn't you tell me last night? I didn't know how, I admitted. He thinks I don't know, corrupting you or something. Jake's jaw clenched, and for a second, I thought he might cry or yell or both. Instead, he grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward the locker room. "He doesn't get to decide this," he said, his voice fierce. "Not for me. Not for us." But as he spoke, I saw the fear in his eyes, fear of his dad, of this town, of what it meant to be us. And I knew this was only the beginning. The locker room smelled of chlorine and damp towels, and Jake's grip on my wrist was tight, like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. His sunglasses hung around his neck, and his eyes were stormy, searching mine for answers I didn't have. "He can't do this," Jake said, pacing. "He doesn't even know me." "Not really." I leaned against a locker, my heart still pounding from the night before. "Jake, he's your dad. He's not just gonna let this go." I hated saying it, but the truth felt heavy between us. Mr. Callahan wasn't some distant figure. He was a high school football coach, a man who commanded respect in this town, and his word carried weight. Jake stopped pacing and faced me, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't care what he thinks. I care about you." His words hit me hard, like sunlight breaking through clouds, but they also scared me. This wasn't just about us, Anna Maria, it was about his family, his future, everything he stood to lose. I glanced at the door, half expecting Mr. Callahan to barge in. "What do we do?" He told me to stay away. If he sees us together. I trailed off, imagining his dad's glare, the kind that could make you feel small and wrong. Jake ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched into every line of his face. "I'll talk to him. Tonight. I'll make him understand." I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. And if he doesn't? Jake didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his hand brushing mine, and for a moment, the world shrank to just us. "Then we figure it out together," he said softly. "I'm not losing you, Ethan." That afternoon, we sat on the bleachers by the community pool, watching kids cannonball into the water. Jake was quieter than usual, his knee bouncing nervously. I wanted to say something to ease the tension, but my own fears kept me silent. What if his dad told my parents? My mom was open-minded, but my dad, he'd once called a gay couple on TV unnatural. I wasn't ready to face that. "Let's get out of here," Jake said suddenly. "Go somewhere we can just be." We ended up at the old quarry on the edge of town, a place kids went to sneak beers or make out. It was deserted today, the water below glinting like glass. We sat on a flat rock, shoulders touching, and for a while, we didn't need words. The silence was enough, heavy with everything we weren't saying. "I've never felt like this before," Jake admitted, staring at the water. "Not with anyone. It's like, you make everything make sense." I swallowed hard, my chest tight. "Same," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it's scary. You know. This town, your dad, my parents, it feels like the world's against us." Jake turned to me, his eyes fierce. "Then we fight. We don't let them win." I wanted to kiss him right then, to hold on to this moment and forget everything else. But the crunch of tires on gravel snapped us out of it. A truck pulled up. Mr. Callahan's truck. My stomach dropped as he stepped out, his face a mask of barely contained anger. "Jake," he barked. "Get in the truck. Now." Jake stood, his fists clenched. "No. I'm not leaving Ethan." Mr. Callahan's eyes flicked to me, and I felt like I was shrinking under his gaze. "You're making a mistake, son," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This isn't who you are." You don't know who I am. Jake shouted, his voice cracking. You never have. The air felt electric, like it might explode. I stood frozen, caught between wanting to protect Jake and wanting to disappear. Mr. Callahan took a step toward us, and I braced myself, not knowing what would come next. The quarry was silent except for the hum of cicadas and the distant ripple of water below. Mr. Callahan's boots crunched on the gravel as he closed the distance, his eyes never leaving Jake. I wanted to grab Jake's hand and run, but my legs felt like lead. Get in the truck, Jake. Mr. Callahan repeated, his voice steady but laced with something darker disappointment. Maybe. Or fear. We're not doing this here. Jake stood his ground, his shoulders squared. I'm not a kid anymore. Dad. You can't just order me around. Mr. Callahan's jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought he might grab Jake and drag him away. Instead, he turned to me, his gaze cutting through me like a knife. You, he said, pointing. You're the problem here. You're confusing him. The words stung, but I found my voice. I'm not confusing anyone, I said, my voice shaking. Jake knows what he wants. Jake stepped in front of me, like a shield. He's right, Dad. This is me. This is who I am. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Callahan's face softened for a split second, like he was seeing his son for the first time. But then it hardened again. You're throwing your life away, he said quietly. You think this town will accept this? You think I can? I don't need your permission to be myself. Jake shot back. Mr. Callahan shook his head, like he was trying to shake off the words. We're going home. Now. He turned toward the truck, expecting Jake to follow. But Jake didn't move. He grabbed my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, and my heart raced not just from fear, but from the strength in his grip. I'm staying, he said. Mr. Callahan stopped, his back to us, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. You walk away from me now, Jake, and you're walking away from this family. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and final. Jake's hand tightened around mine, and I could feel him trembling. I wanted to tell him to go, to save himself from this fight, but I couldn't. He was choosing me, and it felt like the bravest thing I'd ever seen. I'm not walking away from anything, Jake said, his voice steady now. You're the one pushing me out. Mr. Callahan didn't turn around. He climbed into his truck, slammed the door, and drove off, leaving dust swirling in the air. Jake let out a shaky breath, and I pulled him close, my arms around him as the reality sank in. He'd just stood up to his dad for me, for us, but at what cost? We sat back on the rock, the quarry stretching out before us, vast and quiet. What now? I asked, my voice barely audible. I don't know, Jake admitted. But I meant what I said. I'm not losing you. That night, Jake didn't go home. He crashed at my place, sneaking in through my window like we were kids again. My mom was out of town, and my dad was working late, so we had the house to ourselves. We lay on my bed, not touching, just staring at the ceiling, the weight of the day pressing down on us. I've never seen him like that, Jake said after a long silence. He's always been tough, but I thought he'd at least try to understand. I turned to face him, propping myself up on one elbow. Maybe he will. In time. Jake's eyes met mine, and there was a flicker of hope there, but it was buried under fear. What if he doesn't? What if he tells everyone? The thought made my stomach churn. Our town wasn't exactly progressive. Kids at school already whispered about me. The quiet kid who didn't date girls. If Mr. Callahan outed us, it could ruin everything. Then we deal with it, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Together. Jake smiled, a small, sad smile, and reached for my hand. Together, he echoed. But as we drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something bigger, something we weren't ready for. Morning light filtered through my blinds, casting stripes across Jake's face as he slept. I watched him, his chest rising and falling, and felt a pang of guilt. He'd chosen me over his dad, over his family, and I wasn't sure I was worth it. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from my mom. Home tonight. Everything okay? I typed a quick reply, then glanced at Jake. He stirred, blinking awake, and for a moment, he looked peaceful. Then he remembered. I need to go home, he said, sitting up. I need to talk to him again. I grabbed his arm. Jake, maybe give it a day. He was pissed yesterday. But Jake shook his head. I can't just hide. He's my dad. I have to try. We biked to his house in silence, the summer air thick with humidity. When we pulled up, Mr. Callahan's truck was in the driveway, and my heart sank. Jake squeezed my hand before heading inside, leaving me on the sidewalk, feeling useless. I waited, kicking at pebbles, my mind racing. What if his dad kicked him out? What if he hurt him? Jake was strong, but Mr. Callahan was stronger, and not just physically. He had a way of making you feel like you'd already lost. 10 minutes later, Jake came out, his face unreadable. He climbed onto his bike and motioned for me to follow. We rode to the park, stopping under a massive oak tree. He didn't yell, Jake said finally. He just talked. Said I'm confused, that I need time to figure things out. He wants me to see a counselor. A counselor? I frowned. Like conversion therapy. Jake shrugged, but his eyes were dark. He didn't say that. But, yeah, probably. He thinks this is a phase. Anger flared in my chest. It's not a phase. You know that. I know, Jake said, his voice breaking. But he's my dad, Ethan. He's all I've got. I wanted to argue, to tell him he had me, but I knew it wasn't the same. Family was family, and I couldn't replace that. Instead, I hugged him, letting him bury his face in my shoulder. We'll figure it out, I whispered, echoing his words from yesterday. That afternoon, we went back to the quarry, needing a place to breathe. We talked about everything: college, leaving town, starting over somewhere no one knew us. Jake wanted to study engineering. I wanted to write. We dreamed of a future where we didn't have to hide, but it felt so far away. As the sun set, Jake's phone rang. It was his mom. He answered, and I watched his face change, first confusion, then panic. What? When? He said, standing up. Okay, I'm coming. He hung up and grabbed my hand. It's my dad. He's at the hospital. Heart attack. The world tilted. We raced to the hospital, my legs burning as I pedaled behind Jake. When we got there, the waiting room was sterile and cold, the kind of place that made you feel small. Jake's mom was there, her eyes red from crying. She hugged Jake, then glanced at me, her expression unreadable. He's stable, she said. But it was serious. He's asking for you, Jake. Jake nodded, but he looked terrified. I squeezed his shoulder. Go. I'll wait here. As he disappeared down the hall, I sank into a plastic chair, my mind spinning. Mr. Callahan had been a wall between us, but now he was fragile, human, and I didn't know what that meant for Jake or for us. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear, and I sat in the waiting room, staring at the linoleum floor. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown, though to what? I wasn't sure. Jake had been gone for an hour, and I was starting to wonder if I should leave when he finally came back, his face pale and drawn. "He's okay," Jake said, sitting next to me. "For now. They're keeping him overnight." I nodded, unsure what to say. "What did he say?" Jake leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "He didn't mention us. Just talked about work, the team, like nothing happened. But he looked scared. Ethan. I've never seen him like that." I reached for his hand, then stopped, remembering where we were. The waiting room wasn't exactly private, and I could feel eyes on us nurses, other families, strangers who might judge. "Maybe this changes things," I said cautiously. "Maybe he'll see you differently now." Jake snorted, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, right. He's still him." We left the hospital and walked to a diner across the street, the kind of place with sticky tables and neon signs. Over greasy fries and milkshakes, Jake opened up. He's always been so, in control. Football, family, everything. But today, he looked like he was falling apart. I stirred my milkshake, the ice clinking against the glass. Maybe that's a chance to talk to him, really talk. Jake looked at me, his eyes searching. "You think he'd listen?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But you're his son. That's got to mean something." The next day, Jake went back to the hospital alone. I stayed home, trying to distract myself with homework, but my mind kept drifting to him. What if his dad doubled down? What if he pushed Jake even further away? When Jake texted me to meet up that evening, I was nervous. We met at the park again, under the same oak tree. He looked exhausted, but there was a spark in his eyes I hadn't seen before. He listened, Jake said, almost like he couldn't believe it. "I told him about you everything. How I feel. How you make me feel." He didn't yell. He just nodded. My heart leapt. "So he's okay with it?" "Not exactly," Jake said, his voice cautious. "He said he needs time. But he didn't tell me to stop seeing you." It wasn't a victory. Not really. But it was something. A crack in the wall. We sat there, watching the stars come out, and for the first time in days, I felt like we could breathe. But the next week brought new challenges. Word had spread small towns talk, and someone had seen us at the quarry, holding hands. By Monday, the whispers at school were louder. Kids stared, some snickered, and one guy, a linebacker on Jake's dad's team, called me a slur in the hallway. Jake wasn't there to hear it, but I saw the way his friends looked at him in the cafeteria, their smiles tight, their conversations short. I found him after school by the bleachers, his head in his hands. "They know," he said when I sat down. "Not everyone, but enough. It's going to get worse." I wanted to tell him it would be okay, but the words felt empty. Instead, I took his hand, not caring who saw. "We're in this together," I said. "No matter what." Jake looked at me, his eyes wet. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Yes, you do," I said fiercely. "And I'm not going anywhere." But as we walked home, the weight of the town's judgment pressed down on us, and I knew the fight was far from over. School became a battlefield. The whispers turned into taunts, and Jake's teammates started icing him out. He was still the star quarterback, but practice was tense, and I could see it wearing him down. I tried to be his rock, but I was struggling too. My English teacher, Ms. Harper, noticed my distraction and pulled me aside after class. "Ethan, you okay?" she asked, her voice kind but firm. I shrugged, not trusting myself to speak. She didn't push, just handed me a flyer for a local LGBTQ+ support group. "You don't have to go," she said, "but it's there if you need it." I stuffed the flyer in my pocket, unsure if I'd ever use it. But that night, I showed it to Jake. We were in my room, the door locked to keep out my dad's questions. "Maybe we should check it out," I said, "just to see." Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. But don't expect me to talk." The group met in a community center downtown, a small room with folding chairs and a coffee maker in the corner. The facilitator, a woman named Carla, was warm and welcoming, and the group was small, mostly college kids, a few adults, and us. We listened as people shared their stories coming out, losing friends, finding new ones. Jake stayed quiet, but I could tell he was listening, his hand gripping mine under the table. When it was my turn to speak, I surprised myself. "I'm Ethan," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm gay. And it's hard, because the person I love is getting hurt because of me." Jake's head snapped up, his eyes wide. I hadn't meant to say love, but it was out there now, raw and true. The room was quiet, but no one judged. Carla smiled, and a guy across from us nodded, like he got it. On the way home, Jake was quiet, but he held my hand the whole way. "You meant that?" he asked finally. "What you said?" I nodded, my face burning. "Yeah. I love you, Jake." He stopped walking and kissed me, right there on the sidewalk, under a streetlight. It was quick, but it felt like a promise. "I love you too," he said, his voice barely a whisper. But the high didn't last. The next day, Jake's dad was back home, recovering but still weak. Jake went to see him, hoping to build on their last talk, but it didn't go well. "He said he's trying," Jake told me later, his voice flat. "But he still thinks I'm making a mistake." I hated how much it hurt him, but I didn't know how to fix it. All I could do was be there, holding his hand through the storm. Then came the football game. It was the biggest of the season, and Jake was starting. I sat in the stands, trying to blend in, but I felt exposed. When Jake threw a perfect pass, the crowd roared, but I saw his dad on the sidelines, his face unreadable. After the game, Jake found me outside the locker room, his hair still wet from the shower. He didn't say anything about us, Jake said, but he hugged me. "That's something, right?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "It's something." But as we walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still on borrowed time. Fall turned the leaves to fire, but the air in our town felt colder. Jake and I were careful now, avoiding public displays of affection, but the rumors still spread. Someone spray-painted a slur on my locker, and though the janitor scrubbed it off, the sting lingered. Jake wanted to confront the whole school, but I begged him to let it go. "We can't fight everyone," I said. He didn't listen. At lunch, when a group of his teammates started whispering and laughing, Jake stood up, his tray clattering to the table. "You got something to say? Say it to my face," he snapped. The cafeteria went quiet. The linebacker from before, Matt, smirked. "Chill, Callahan. We're just messing around." "It's not a joke," Jake said, his voice steady. "I'm with Ethan. Deal with it." My heart stopped. He'd just come out, in front of everyone. I wanted to hug him, to run, to do something, but I just sat there, frozen. The room buzzed with whispers, but Jake sat back down, his hand finding mine under the table. After that, things got worse before they got better. Some kids avoided us, but others people we barely knew started sitting with us, offering quiet support. MS. Harper checked in on me, and Carla from the support group texted to see how we were holding up. Jake's dad was another story. He was back at work, coaching from the sidelines, but he and Jake barely talked. One night, Jake showed up at my house, his eyes red. He said he loves me, but he can't accept this. Jake said, he thinks I'm throwing my life away. I pulled him into a hug, wishing I could take his pain away. He's wrong, I said. You're not throwing anything away. You're being you. Jake nodded, but I could tell he was breaking inside. We spent the night planning our escape college applications, scholarships, cities where we could be ourselves. It was a lifeline, something to hold on to. Then came the call from Carla. The support group was hosting a community event, a kind of open mic night for queer kids and allies. You should speak, she told us. Your story could help someone. I was terrified, but Jake was all in. Let's do it, he said. Let's show them we're not ashamed. The night of the event, the community center was packed. I stood at the mic, my hands shaking, and told our story, how we fell in love, how we fought to stay together, how it hurt but was worth it. Jake went next, his voice strong as he talked about standing up to his dad, about choosing love over fear. The crowd applauded, and for the first time, I felt like we weren't alone. Afterward, a girl came up to us, tears in her eyes. I'm not out yet, she said. But seeing you guys, it gives me hope. Jake squeezed my hand, and I knew we'd done something right. Winter came, and with it, a fragile peace. Jake's dad started talking to him again, not about us, but about small things, like school and football. It wasn't acceptance, but it was progress. My parents were another hurdle. I came out to my mom first, over coffee one morning. She cried, not out of anger, but because she wished I'd told her sooner. My dad was harder. He didn't speak to me for a week, but eventually, he came around, saying, "You're my son. That's what matters." Jake and I got into the same college, a small liberal arts school in Massachusetts, far from Virginia's prying eyes. We spent our last months in town leaning on each other, building a future we could believe in. The support group became our second family, and we volunteered there, helping younger kids navigate their own journeys. One spring evening, Mr. Callahan asked Jake to meet him at the quarry, the same place where everything had exploded months before. I waited at home, nervous, until Jake called me, his voice shaky but hopeful. He apologized. Jake said, "Not for everything, but," he said, "he's trying. He wants to meet you. Properly." I didn't know what to expect when I walked into their house the next day. Mr. Callahan was in the living room, looking smaller than I remembered. "Ethan," he said, standing. "I haven't been fair to you. I'm not there yet. But I see how much you mean to Jake. That's enough for now." It wasn't a full embrace, but it was a start. Jake's mom smiled from the kitchen, and I felt a weight lift. Graduation came, and Jake and I walked across the stage, our hands brushing as we tossed our caps into the air. The town hadn't changed, but we had. We'd fought for our love, for our place in the world, and we'd won out everything, but enough. As we packed for college, Jake pulled me into the backyard, the pool shimmering behind us. "This is where it started," he said, smiling. "You, me, this pool." I laughed. remembering that night, the fear, the shiver that still lingered. Yeah, I said. And look where we are now. Jake kissed me, slow and sure, and I knew, no matter what came next, we'd face it together. Love wasn't easy, but it was worth every fight, every tear, every moment of joy. And as we stood there, the future stretched out before us, wide open and full of possibility.